The director of APEDA, Dr. Tarun Bajaj, introduce.
Thank you very much. Good evening from India and good morning to friends in USA. This is indeed a very, very motivational factor that we are, after a long time, we are having another kind of this get together to discuss a very important issue, which is on the import requirements of USA. The APEDA, the full form of which is Agricultural and Processed Food Export Development Authority, we are mandated for promoting exports of agricultural and processed food products. We have more than 30,000 members and almost 15 to 16,000 are very active exporter members. And out of 41 billion US dollar exports of agri products, we take care of almost 22 billion. So around 50% of our agri exports is taken care by us. So that means we have a very wide reach. And we are growing very at an encouraging pace. Last year, we grew 29% despite COVID and other restrictions which were within the country and worldwide also. The reason is two, that we ensure supplies, and at the same time, we, APEDA, have given a message to our member exporters that no compromise to the quality. This is the important concept which we have given to our exporters. And when we say quality, the quality within our country, because that means Food Safety Authority of India, which is our regulatory body, then the the requirements of the importing country. That is very important. In fact, our Food Safety Authority's standards are mostly harmonized with the codex, and importing countries' standards also, we ensure that they are fulfilled. If at all we find that these standards are not risk-based and they are non-tariff barrier, we do contest. And we communicate through our bilateral meetings to the country that this is a non-tariff barrier. Till then, we do give a message to our exporters that they have to fulfill all these requirements. What we have done as far as quality is concerned, to give them a support to our exporters, we have more than 225 laboratories, testing laboratories in India, which are most modern, matching all international standards. So whatever is the requirement of the importing country, they can test it, and accordingly, they can match those standards. They can ensure that the product they are sending, they are as per the importing country requirements. All our units, or rather most of the units, are HACCP and ISO certified. That means they follow International Food Safety Management System. All are FSCCI registered, which is our regulatory body. Without that, they cannot produce even any processed food or any food products in the country. So all these safeguards are there. Besides, we also have a system in certain which are critical areas. We do have a system of conducting inspections periodically through a committee. And then there are also pre-shipment testing is also there. So most of the times what we have seen, the quality is not a major issue. The major issue comes on the labeling requirements of the importing countries. The importing country have their own typical special requirements like any other country. Like in India, we also have special requirements. For example, there is a special requirement in India of having green dot and red dot, which is to signify whether it is vegetarian or non-vegetarian, because in India, we have a large number of vegetarian population, and for them, this issue is very sensitive. That's why a special requirement on the label is green dot and red dot. Of course, now they have special, another mark is there, but that is a requirement. Like this, every country have their own special requirements of labeling. At the same time, on the label claims, when somebody makes a label claim, ensure that they are able to meet those label claims if they are tested, if they are found at any stage. all what we have noticed that this is a particular area, this information is very important for our exporters. And if quality and these labeling requirements are not properly fulfilled, sometimes they have to bring back the goods, which is huge cost. And on rare occasions, they are also asked to destroy at their own cost in that country, which is cost, stress, and embarrassment. So this taking care, we are from time to time, we do conduct this kind of workshops in India, and with the collaboration with our partners and also missions abroad, we do conduct our ensure that we are having these kinds of information disseminated to our to our exporters, and accordingly we that's the reason we are able to grow at this pace every year. So this, we congratulate this organizers, and we are particularly thankful to our mission for organizing this event, Shelly, and all the organizers. And thank you very much for giving me this an opportunity, and best wishes to everyone. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bajaj. Next, we have the director of MPEDA, Mr. M. Karthikeyan, who would be introducing MPEDA and their members.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. A very good morning to the friends in the US. A very good evening to all the friends in India. It's really a great opportunity for our seafood fraternity that we are having such wonderful workshop where the seafood import requirements are going to be discussed. And definitely this will pave a large way for our exporters to address the requirements of seafood being imported into US, and we can enhance our exports. Basically, we in MPEDA, we promote the seafood exports from India. And for the past 10 years, our seafood export have enhanced in a very large volume as well as in value-wise. And USA is our major exporter. Actually, we get 41% of our revenue through US exports to US. And USA is USA buys the most quantity of shrimp from India, and we get almost like 2.5 billion through US exports to US shrimp. And when we talk about US, the relationship with US shrimp exporters, we get the broodstock from US, and we use the broodstock imported from mostly from the US to produce the shrimp, where we quarantine the material in Chennai. Then again, the hatcheries are supplied with the quarantined broodstock. It is again being used by the hatcheries for producing seeds. The farmers take the seeds from the hatcheries and produce the best quality shrimps, and the shrimps are again being exported to US. Mostly the shrimps are exported to US, and we export to more than 100 countries. And the next 2 years, we have China as the second largest market. Then we have EU as the third largest market. Japan we have. And we also have market in Middle East as well as in Russian countries. All the countries also we cover. Basically, our exporters maintain the high quality standards, what is being required by the importing nations. That's why we are able to catch hold of the US market for the past 6 years. We are the leading suppliers of shrimp to US. And again, the Embassy of India has taken a good initiative in organizing such a wonderful workshop wherein our exporters will be given a clear understanding and awareness on the requirements, because recent past we have a lot of refusals which are happening. Though we are exporting more than 2.5 billion worth material, around 18,000 containers are being exported every year from India. We have rejections of around 46 or 47 nowadays. And most of the refusals happens because of either filth or salmonella. And though we have high-class facilities, like we have more than 1,300 exporters who are dealing with seafood export, and there are more than 600 seafood processing manufacturing units. And we are happy to say that yes, India is one of the country with most EU approved units. More than 400 units are approved by EU. That means that we have the high quality and standard infrastructure in India to produce. And again, US FDA has taken and a lot of trainings for us from the beginning, from 90s. We have been training the seafood exporters with the training support from US FDA, and through MPEDA we have been training. And this training has helped the exporters to produce the good quality products. And we export a lot of varieties of products within shrimp. And most of the products which are being exported is in the names of different importing company retail outlets in the US, like Cisco, Costco, or Walmart. And our product is being really accepted by the consumers there. And we would assure that yes, we'll continue to export the best quality material, and we'll promote the export of best quality material in coordination with the US FDA and the embassy there. And our exporters will definitely meet out the standards. And this workshop, our exporters will have a lot of doubts. Maybe they want to clarify, and Ma'am Shelley will give a very good input for exporters. So I wish all the very best for this workshop, and I thank the embassy for organizing this wonderful workshop. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Karthikeyan. Next, we have the Assistant Director of Spices Board, Mr. Nitin Jo, introducing Spices Board and their members.
Hi. Good morning to my friends and colleagues from the United States, and good evening to the friends and colleagues from India. Yeah, it's indeed a pleasure to see the overwhelming response in today's online session, which primarily aims at providing the right information to the right sector of stakeholders. I represent Spices Board, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, which is an export promotion body for the promotion of spices and spice products exports from India. Like Dr. Bajaj was explaining with respect to EPEDA, we do carry out similar functions with regard to spices and spice products. India, as most of us are aware, is currently the world's largest producer, consumer, as well as exporter of spices and spice products. And USA has traditionally been a major market for Indian spices. USA is ranked second as the major export destination of spices from India. And, and the country contributes to around 60% in revenue earnings from spices exports. The specialty of exports of spices from India to United States is most of the exports of spices are in value-added form, including high-end value-added products such as spice oils and oleoresins, as well as various other value-added products from the wide range of spices which India produces. Now, we have a base of more than 7,000 registered exporters who sent spices and spice products last year to around 180 countries in and almost 220 plus forms of spices. Having said that, we still realize the need for better compliance with the quality and the labeling standards prescribed by the buying countries. And I'm sure this workshop would give the Indian spice exporters the right information as well as a platform to get their doubts and concerns clarified by Ms. Shelley, who is an expert in this field. So I would like to thank the embassy officials, Madam Suja, Mr. Abu, Ms. Harshala, and their team for taking this right step this new year also. We had a similar program last year, as was recalled by Madam in her inaugural address. So we look forward to having similar engagements with United States so that our spice exports to the USA further flourishes, which would help us in achieving the export target of $4.81 billion worth spice exports in the current financial year. Thank you.
Harshala, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Joe. And next we have Ms. Shelley beginning her presentation. Over to you, Shelley.
Thank you, Harshala, and thank you to the Embassy of India for coordinating. Madam Suja, I really appreciate the introduction and just the organization efforts. This has been a really good experience and great working with Harshala and Abu. Good evening to the friends in India. Thank you for accommodating the evening time slot, for accommodating the East Coast and the morning time here. Really appreciate that. This evening, I would like to discuss, various issues affecting Indian exporters. I know we received some questions through the embassy on areas of focus and of interest that are affecting your industries. So we'll attempt to cover some of those issues. And of course, to the extent we are not able, because each of these issues is very complex and very deep, I do encourage you to reach out to me by email or phone, and I'm happy to talk with you one-on-one about specific issues affecting your companies and your respective industries. So today I'd like to, talk about, and we've already, Dr. Bajaj and Mr. Joe and Dr. Karthikarian talked about, India's large presence in the US in a variety of commodities. And that is, absolutely known here in the States. I'd like to talk about our role as outside FDA counsel and how we help and give you some examples. And then also focus a lot of the discussion on import alerts, FDA refusals, FDA detentions, because it seems to be that India, despite its rigorous testing procedures and quality controls, there are still a number of import alerts affecting India as a region, and also a lot of detentions and refusals that are coming in. There were some questions on the Chlorpyrifos tolerance, the pesticide residue that EPA revoked in August. So we'll touch on that. And then also talk about the import of unauthorized goods or unauthorized parties, and then also discuss some labeling issues. And feel free to include any questions in the question box. And I know Harshala will send those over. And if not, like I said, I'd be happy to address that after the workshop. So we all know this, but India is a core component of US trade. It is the 7th largest supplier of food to the US. And as Dr. Bajaj accurately stated, total imports of agricultural products from India reached 2.6 billion in 2019. The leading agricultural sectors are spices, rice, essential oils, seafood, of course, processed fruits and vegetables, and other vegetable oils. And as many of us know, and I'm, particularly vested in the Indian market as a first-generation Indian American, we want to see more of these products successfully being imported into the United States. So our role as outside counsel is to assist companies through the life cycle of product across all FDA product categories. So that includes foods, seafoods, conventional foods, beverages, including beverage alcohol, dietary supplements, cosmetics, homeopathic products, over-the-counter drugs, and medical devices. We cover everything. The focus of today's workshop is largely going to be in the food sector, just because of the breadth, but we certainly do cover all components. And the specific areas that we provide counsel are product development issues. So if a company is bringing a product to market and wants to understand, am I a conventional food or am I a dietary supplement? For example, let's say we have turmeric in a dietary supplement or in a supplement tablet, or even a liquid beverage. There is a strategic placement in terms of regulation as to where you are on the store shelf. Do you want to be positioned as a conventional food or as a dietary supplement? And there are related regulatory requirements that attach depending on which category you pursue. So we assist in providing counsel to companies on which path to follow based on the intended marketing objective, and then also providing guidance on labeling, product safety, good manufacturing practice compliance, advertising and social media reviews, and the like, to launch that product into the United States. We also assist with everything related to enforcement. So naturally, all of these products are being imported to the US, so there is scrutiny at the time of import. There are import detentions, as we know, import refusals, import alerts affecting Indian exporters, either as a manufacturer or as a region affecting India. There can also be product recalls, FDA inspections. So just because you are situated in India in a facility in Delhi does not mean that FDA cannot reach you. They will send foreign inspectors to inspect your plants should there be an issue, either a routine or for-cause inspection. So all of those areas, we will assist companies in managing and addressing the allegations with the FDA and hopefully having successful resolution of those issues. We also assist with contracts, so anything related to supplier agreements, distributor agreements, quality agreements, Proposition 65. I saw that was a question amongst the audience. We'll touch on that briefly depending on time. And also litigation. So in the event there's any disputes between private parties or a government agency, we get involved. But by and large, we are your FDA regulatory partner. Our goal is to help private companies and citizens successfully export and import product into the United States and avoid FDA regulatory action. FDA wears a number of hats. They are a regulator in the US and they are an enforcer. But they are not an agency that, the protection of the consumer is first and foremost. And so our job is to help Indian exporters bring those goods compliantly, efficiently, so there's no delays at the time of import, and have a good relationship with FDA so that there's transparency and there's trust. So I want to give you just two examples, which I think is relevant to a lot of the issues that you all as companies and industries have faced. So I continue to be outside regulatory counsel to one of the largest Indian basmati rice companies that has about a 50% market share in the United States. And several years ago, there were allegations of unauthorized pesticide residues in rice. So the situation was that the Indian government had authorized certain Indian-based pesticides, which did not have an approval in the United States. And the Indian farmers were using these pesticides that were destined for crops in the US. Now, the Indian company had separated fields. They had an outbound farm destined to the US and other parts of the world where the pesticide, was accepted, but there was some chemical drift from neighboring fields that had not just yet transitioned. And so there were a number of issues that resulted from these unauthorized pesticide residues. The company was placed on several import alerts. They experienced significant entry holes and had a high volume of liquidated damages. I can't tell you how many import detentions, nearing 1 million per entry in revenue was lost. And so there were several issues that we had to deal with. One was removing the various facilities from import alert, which we successfully did. Another was to petition EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, for a tolerance for the molecule that Indian farmers were using on rice. And we successfully did that. And another was to train farmers in India and the facilities there on US GMP requirements. And this also affects seafood companies, but hazard analysis, HACCP is the program, hazard analysis critical control points, and a corrective action plan. And a lot of these issues are similar to the types of documentation a company would submit to FDA to remove them from import alert. Another company was producing Amul butter, and there was a labeling issue that stemmed from import of Amul butter. So in the US, butter is defined as milk made from cows, but Amul butter, as we know, was using buffalo milk. And so FDA flagged that as an issue and said, you can't call it butter, and Dr. Bajaj talked about labeling issues, and this was a very core labeling problem. And so there were options we had to come up with to determine how can we adequately call something butter, but still be in compliance with the FDA labeling requirements. There was another facility for this product that was on import alert for economic substitution. So the issue was that the facility was substituting milk for a lower quality ingredient, and FDA identified that in an import alert as charging them with economic substitution. And so we had to discuss GMP issues at origin. So these are the types of issues, just a snapshot of 2 cases that I worked with that are very relevant to the types of issues I think you all are encountering. So I want to talk about next the difference between import detention, import refusal, and import alert. Now, an import detention is related to a specific entry. You are importing a product into the United States and FDA intercepts it at a port of entry. And so what happens is they will detain it and they will give you a period of time. It's usually about 10 to 14 days to overcome the appearance of the violation. And the company has to submit oral or written testimony. And that just means that you have to respond to the detention. Now, the basis of that detention will be one of 2 things. It will either be a charge of adulteration or a charge of misbranding. Now, adulteration means that something is not fit for human consumption. So if there's an allegation of salmonella, of filth, of a foreign particle in a product, for example, with Indian spices, there's been a lot of issues in salmonella and filth in sanitary conditions, then FDA could say this product is adulterated. If there's an issue with labeling, again, as Dr. Bajaj mentioned, a lot of imports are coming in and have to get returned to origin because of labeling issues. FDA would charge a misbranding charge. And it can be anything. It can be, maybe the label says paneer, but the US market doesn't know what paneer is. There has to be a qualified descriptor, Indian style cheese. We can come up with different ways to adequately address what the labeling issues are. It could be something as, it's missing a standard of identity or net quantity contents. Labeling, this workshop is not geared, directly towards labeling, and we can do another one, but there are specific requirements that FDA is looking for food exporters to meet to have a compliant label. And we actually have a dedicated team that only does label compliance reviews. And we represent several thousand companies and check labels, all day long, making sure that the labels do comply with FDA requirements, because that is the first thing that FDA will see when a product is imported. So it needs to be compliant. But the detention could be based on either one of those 2 issues. FDA sometimes will do a test or a sample of the product. That could be a lab test. It could be an organoleptic test, which is a smell test. Dr. Karthik Aryan, I think, mentioned, imports of seafood, and there have been issues with the organoleptic test in seafood products. Is it a correct sample? Is it the right methodology? I know there was a question about the opportunity to retest. So if FDA conducts a test and finds that a sample is in violation, then generally that assessment is given a lot of weight. There is deference to the FDA. Unless a company can show that there was an issue with the testing methodology, can you add your own test? But generally speaking, if FDA has a test that says this is not good, and you have a test that says it is, FDA's test will win, except if you can show that there is a difference or an issue or problem with the methodology. But that is a high burden to prove, and really the corrective action is implementing, more frequent or different testing programs at origin. But it is critically important to respond to a detention notice. Even if you feel that FDA has mischarged you or misdetained the product, it is very important to respond. And there is that period of time to respond. You'll get a detention notice, and it'll have a respond by date. And we all the time, I help companies respond to those detention notices and admit an entry so that it doesn't get refused. So should you need that support, we are here to help you. If you don't respond, or if FDA determines that your response is not good enough, they would issue an import refusal. That's number 2. That is also related to a specific entry, but that represents final agency action. So you have 14 days to respond. If you don't respond, or you respond poorly, or you respond, not to FDA satisfaction, FDA will issue a refusal. After that, you can't do anything else. That is it. That entry must go back within 90 days back to India or another region, or it has to be destroyed under supervision. If you have a series of import refusals and import detentions, this goes to the third bullet. FDA can recommend that you be placed on import alert. That is called a red list. That means that every entry coming in from that facility is automatically detained without examination, without physical exam. That's called DWPE. And so the burden shifts to the importer or the manufacturer to now prove that their product is compliant. And we'll talk more about how to get off of an import alert. So as many of us know, Indian refusals have been high over the last several months. I just pulled the data for October, but there were 95 import refusals issued to Indian companies for noodle products, tamarind, and a lot of the issues dealt with filth and salmonella, in sanitary conditions. The import alerts you can see here, there are a variety of import alerts for Indian exporters. Histamine and decomposition on fish and seafood products, spices having import alerts for filth again, microbiological contamination of coconuts, unsafe drug residues in honey, and like we talked about, pesticide residues and a variety of commodities, including rice. So what is an import alert? An import alert is an enforcement tool that keeps potentially dangerous products from entering the United States. And like I said, it allows FDA to detain without physically examining, so they don't have to do another test. This is it. You're automatically getting held without FDA examining the shipment for products that have a history of being violative. And that's because of the refusals that have added up. This, of course, as you know, is costly. It causes delays and it upsets the business flow. So now you have a product that's supposed to come in, but it can't reach the end user because it's being held at FDA. And you also wonder, how can I continue to source or import and obviously make the consumer happy, the consumer or the retailer happy. So it can affect a manufacturer, a shipper, a grower, an importer, or a geographic area. And it means that you can't import product until you show the importer that the product is in compliance with US FDA requirements. We talked about this, so I'll skip this. And like I said, the way a company is placed on import alert is a variety of mechanisms, but largely it's a history of importing violative product. It could also be issues raised during an inspection, something to do with recalls, issues raised with recalls, or signs that appropriate actions were not taken at the facility and causes product to be adulterated. And here's just a chart showing the different types of import alerts that could affect different categories, shippers, manufacturers. And I'm happy to send this presentation around so you can have it for reference. So the import alert takes effect immediately after approval and publication. It is on FDA's website. And it doesn't look good. No one wants to Google a company and find that they are on import alert, especially a supplier, someone that is sourcing product and importing to retailers or consumers in the US. So how do you get off? The good news is that there is a process to remove a company from import alert. And I have worked with dozens of companies to successfully remove them. I'm proud to say I have a 100% track record in removing companies from import alert. And so we're very familiar with that process. It has to, successful removal involves a number of documentation records. It includes testing, sampling protocols, a corrective action plan. So identifying the issues that caused placement, why was I placed on import alert? What have I investigated? What have I corrected? And what are the test records to show that things are now coming in compliantly? So we would draft a petition for removal. It's usually a 10 to 20 page petition letter with supporting exhibits and evidence to show that the company has adopted the compliance measures to successfully remove them. We wait FDA's acknowledgement, and there's a reviewer assigned. In the past, the process has taken about 10 to 16 weeks, but in recent time, we've gotten it down to 4 to 8 weeks. So long as all of the material is in order and we can draft a response, we're looking at a much faster turnaround. And after that, if we're successful, FDA would issue a notice of removal to all districts, and that company would be off of import alert. Some key points in developing documentation for successfully removing a company from import alert is that we can't remove a company just to get off of the red list. It has to be in the normal course of business. So we get a lot of questions about, difference in sample size. If my normal volume is X kg, can I now import a smaller subset to develop data to get off of the import alert? And the answer to that is no. It has to be in the ordinary course of business. And you do have to verify that the conditions that cause the violation no longer exist. So this is some terminology that is used, and I just wanted to clarify, what this means. A green list is considered a good company list. So these companies have met the criteria for being excluded from the import alert. So FDA oftentimes will publish a red list and a green list. So the green list is considered a good list. You can pass through very easily. The red list is the one that is subject to DWPE, and the yellow list means that you have intensified surveillance. So if you think of it as, analogizing traveling through an airport, if you are TSA pre-check, you are able to get through faster. You're on a green list and you can just zip on by. You don't have to take your shoes off. You don't have to put your laptop on the belt. You can go through. If you're on the red list, FDA is going to ask you to stop. You can't import until you show that you are compliant. And if you're on the yellow list, then you have to proceed with caution. So that's sort of the terminology to help you understand what those terms mean. A lot of companies don't know about the import alert. So they bring product in and they think everything is fine. They get to the US and FDA says, no, wait, you can't come in because you're subject to an import alert. And so it's important to keep abreast of these import alerts. They're published on FDA's website, and I'm happy to circulate a link. So being notified, you can also put them in contracts with suppliers or importers so that they notify you. And it's important to spend time about what happened, what went wrong. A lot of companies come to us and say, we're on an alert, how do we get off immediately? But the right approach is to really investigate the root cause of the issue and to develop corrective actions, to implement those corrective actions, and then to draft this petition to get off of import alert. And like I said, the good news is that it is possible. It takes a little bit of work, but the benefits are tremendous because you will no longer have to deal with import delays. You have a good relationship with companies you're selling to. And you are no longer on a public list where someone can find you, and the embarrassment and the negative publicity that can come with being associated with the red list. Like we said, there's been a lot of refusals, detentions, and import alerts, specifically with spices, specifically with seafood products. Histamine and decomp in mahi-mahi is an import alert, salmonella and filth and insanitary conditions. So it seems to be a systemic challenge. And we're not going to touch on this too much in today's workshop, but there are certain provisions under the Food Safety Modernization Act, it's abbreviated FSMA, and the Good Manufacturing Practice requirements, which allow for facilities to have tighter controls in the supply chain to make sure manufacturing is meeting the standards in the US. I next just want to briefly touch on, it was a question that was raised early on unauthorized import of legitimate goods. So this is called gray market import or parallel market import entry. And so the issue here is you are a company in India, exporting, let's say, pickle products, and it is good and genuine product, and you sell that product A to another distributor, a foreign distributor, a foreign exporter, intending for that product to be sold to, let's say, the Middle East, Dubai. Instead, that authorized distributor sells it to an unauthorized distributor who then sells it to the United States. So you did not intend that pickle product to be sold in the US, but you sold it to someone that then sold it to someone else that then imported it to the US. So that's called an unauthorized import or an unauthorized distribution. And this area of trade is lawful in the US, but there are ways for a company to protect itself and its brand through trademarks, through distinguishing marks on the product to distinguish, US product versus non-US. And there are also US Customs and Border Protection and US Patent and Trademark Office protections. One specific area is called the lever roll protection, and it allows you to record a mark with the CBP office, and they would intercept product that is not supposed to be coming into the United States. And of course, you can also do this by contract and include penalties and liabilities. But I'm happy to address any questions on that. I know that's a big area of concern. I next just want to touch on the EPA notice on chlorpyrifos. So EPA issued this final rule revoking the tolerance of chlorpyrifos across all commodities in August. And I understand the Spice Board and some others responded to that to see if the exclusion could be applied to spices and to other commodities. The state of New York also announced an action level for heavy metals. And, the interplay of state versus federal regulation is always interesting. But because FDA regulates the ports, across the US, FDA would have jurisdiction, and the state of New York or any state that might have a lower or higher tolerance would regulate residue levels through inspections and routine sampling. So it's very important to comply with the federal requirements upon import. And then if you are importing into a particular state, obviously comply with those state rules as well. Like I illustrated with the Basmati rice company, we have been successful in petitioning EPA for tolerance of molecules and or exemptions of certain products. So if this is something that is affecting your industry, and naturally it will for spices and other commodities, then please contact me after and we can talk further about how we can assist. So I just want to also talk about broad scope of how all of the agencies in the US regulate food products. And you can see this little graphic here. So we have food products in the middle, and we have FDA to the right. That's the primary agency that regulates. We have Federal Trade Commission that regulates advertising and promotion of the product. So like Dr. Bajaj said, he was very accurate. Whatever you say on a label has to be true. You cannot say that, this atta provides a good source of protein if that claim is not true and you don't have support for that claim. So FTC will regulate that those claims are truthful and not misleading. US Customs and Border Protection, CBP, will regulate import of the goods. So the tariffs that are associated, which is noted by the HTS, the Harmonized Tariff Schedule, that tariff code that applies to that particular commodity, country of origin issues, and other bonds and related entry requirements for actually bringing that good into the United States. EPA will regulate a lot of food products in the space of pesticides. So we talked about pesticide tolerances and obviously chlorpyrifos. USDA is the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and that will have shared jurisdiction with FDA on meat and milk products, any products that have animal origin. So seafood is exclusively regulated by FDA, but if it's any meat, poultry, egg products that are coming in, USDA has primary jurisdiction. If it's an animal origin ingredient in, for example, a food product or a dietary supplement, so let's say we have fish oil in a dietary supplement, then USDA would regulate that product, and there will likely be a need to obtain a USDA permit. So I get a lot of companies who come to us, they think everything is fine, and then upon import, USDA puts a hold on the product because it's missing a permit. And those types of issues are really solvable, and they should not be happening with a little bit of involvement of understanding the regulations. And certainly we can assist in making sure that those issues don't happen so you don't have those delays. And we talked about states and counties having local regulation as well. So I just wanted to kind of summarize the key food compliance requirements for all companies. Food facility registration is very important. It's a basic requirement. So all companies that are manufacturing, packing, holding, processing food are required to register with FDA. There is a every 2-year renewal requirement that I'm sure many of you are aware of. So it falls on an even numbered year. 2022 will be a renewal year. So companies that are currently registered must renew this year. For foreign companies, like many of our Indian exporter friends, you do need to appoint a US agent in the US, and I assist with that, and we can process your registration and serve as US agent. GMP compliance is another area, of course, that you have to make sure is buttoned up and is in compliance at your facility. And we talked about Food Safety Modernization Act. I won't get into this too much today, but there is, if you are an exporter and have an importer arm, so if you have a company in India and you also have a US importer arm, a US subsidiary, then there could be questions about that US subsidiary acting as a Foreign Supplier Verification Program importer, FSVP, documenting compliance of the supplier. And so there's a program for that. You need to have compliant labeling, advertising, promotion, and if there are any food safety issues, then there are reporting obligations as well. This is just an issue that we've seen in the marketplace, just one example of many with potential labeling issues. And it seems to me that the main buckets of concern for Indian exporters are in the areas of import. So we talked about import detentions and that space, and then also labeling, and then also with EPA issues and Proposition 65. So just a moment on labeling. FDA has, of course, flagged Indian-based products like ghee that doesn't have proper statements of identity. So ghee should be called clarified butter or have some sort of descriptor. Otherwise, FDA will detain the product and refuse the product, meaning it has to be destroyed or exported if that correction is not made. But I want to note, if you receive a notice of detention for a mislabeling, for a misbranding issue, a labeling issue, there is a way to correct that labeling and do a process called reconditioning of the entry. So you can salvage that entry and it doesn't need to go to the state of being refused if you submit a reconditioning proposal. So for example, for atta, I had a client a couple of years ago that was producing an atta product, but 10 years ago, FDA didn't know what atta was. And so we promised and submitted a proposal to recondition that label by describing the product as whole wheat flour and having a nutrition facts panel. So just because you get an FDA detention does not mean that that is the end of the road. there are ways to overcome that detention depending on the issues that FDA is citing. And one of the ways with labeling is through this reconditioning proposal. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that the milk allergen must be declared for ghee. It is sourced from milk, and so the Allergen Labeling Act requires the declaration of 8 major allergens in the US, and milk is one of them. And FDA has issued enforcement action against companies not having that allergen listed. So we're kind of nearing the end here. I just wanted to know something on Proposition 65. I know that was a question. Proposition 65 is a consumer protection statute and enforced in the state of California. It requires companies that have one of the 800 chemicals that are published in California's list to disclose the presence of that chemical for whichever endpoint. It's usually a carcinogen or reproductive toxicity, unless you comply with a safe harbor level. And, I know that is burdensome to do testing and to determine if you're below the safe harbor level to avoid placement of a warning. But unfortunately, that is what is required to do that. There is an option to put the sticker on, to put the warning on, if you choose not to do that testing just to comply. But in my view, if you are able to do that testing to see if there's an exemption, you should. There's also an exemption for small businesses. So if you have 10 or less employees, then you're exempt from that regulation. We do Prop 65 work, all the time as well. It's a core part of the practice area. And so we are responding to demand letters. If a company is not having a warning and needs to have a warning, then a private litigant might sue the company for failure to have the warning. And we're involved in a lot of those settlement issues. So if you have questions on that, I'm happy to address that afterward as well. So these are just some top compliance tips for ongoing imports to the US. You can prevent recurring FDA detentions by really looking at the underlying issue. So don't just respond to the detention and move on, but really look at, what caused this detention? Was it a labeling issue? Was it a quality issue? And how do I make those corrections at the facility? If it's a labeling issue, like I said, we have a label compliance team. And if you send us a label, I'll give you an estimate and we can turn that around. The reviews are very thorough and will certainly add value, for your company moving forward. If it's a quality issue, then, we need to see if it's a one-off, if something happened, out of the blue, or if it's something systemic, like insanitary conditions. And there are options to have GMP consultants in to really get that facility back into compliance. It's important to avoid placement on import alert by avoiding repeat detentions and refusals. So responding to the detention notices and to the extent possible, avoiding refusals. The more refusals you have, the more opportunity FDA has to say this company has, a pattern of violations, and they would recommend that company to be placed on import alert. So you do want to avoid that. If you are placed on import alert, like I said, there is a way out. You are not going to be on that alert forever, so long as we develop and implement the appropriate documentation and submit a petition for removal. And we're happy to be your partner in that. And the last thing, and I think we all know this and strive to do this, is really to make food safety part of the culture at the facility. It's not just getting out of the detention or the refusal or the import alert, but it's really adopting a high quality and eventually having, an equivalence agreement with the US where they view India as having the same level of compliance focus, as the US. There are similar equivalency agreements with Europe and Australia. And I would personally love to see India have the same type of recognition, by the US. And the way to do that is just to keep on top of food safety and quality as part of the culture. So I know we're probably over on time, but I'm happy to address any questions now and even after. Please feel to reach out to me at my email address or phone listed here. And again, I thank the embassy and all of the organizers for coordinating this and allowing me to meet with you. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Shelley. That was very detailed, and I think you covered a lot of the questions that were shared earlier. But just to like double check, I'm just going to ask some of the questions that are more specific and other than the general questions which were covered by you in the presentation. So yeah, there's a question saying, what is the procedure for retesting of the product in a scenario where a product is tested for salmonella positive in USA lab, wherein the products has been treated in India and Indian lab tests show negative for salmonella?
Yeah, thanks, Harshela. So that, that's tricky, but if the product is detained based on FDA's independent sampling, so just to kind of summarize, so FDA, so a company's importing product or exporting product from India to the US, FDA would conduct a sample. And if it finds salmonella present, then FDA's test would stand. Unless that company could show that FDA erred, that they made an error in their testing methodology, they would have to prove the difference in testing. If it is something where there is an import alert and that testing in India is showing it's negative, but FDA obviously has placed them on import alert, there just needs to be a series of testing conducted with the GMP audits, the good manufacturing practice audits, and we would submit all of that information as part of the petition for removal for import alert. So depending on the scenario, that testing will definitely be persuasive in overall removal of the company.
Okay, next we have, what is the recourse, if any, for the Indian exporter products receives alert or refusal from US FDA because the products have been imported by unauthorized parties who have not followed due procedure?
Yeah, thanks, Harshela. So that again relates to this gray market or parallel market import. And so, let's say there's a company that is branded, for lack of a better, just thinking this off the top, let's say it's namkeen, namkeen is coming in from India and it gets flagged, and that brand, let's call it brand X, their brand name and their manufacturer name is all over the label, but the party that's bringing that product in is not authorized to do that. Well, FDA would still look to the manufacturer or the importer bringing the good in to see what the compliance issues are. But the ways to avoid unauthorized import, like I talked about, is lever rule protection at the time of import through customs. And so you can file a recordation with the local office and PTO and have a registered trademark. And then you can also have difference in labeling for product destined for the US and product that is not. So there are certain ways, in packaging, labeling, and outreach to the US government that you could avoid import of those unauthorized products.
Okay, next we have the import refusals issued by the US FDA are not traceable to the information available with the exporters who are listed, as there is no reference to batch number, correct exporter name. Generally, the name of manufacturers are mentioned instead of exporter details. So agencies like Spices Board are constrained to conduct follow-up on the corrective action taken by the exporter subsequent to import refusal. I think it's more like an input they want about this, about how Spices Board, agencies like that can do follow up or corrective action.
So I want to make sure, and I can talk to, I think it was Nitin Joe, who is from the Spices Board. I can talk to him afterward. But I think that question relates to this unauthorized import, if I'm not mistaken, because it seems like what would be happening is, exports are coming from a certain company to India, but then it sounds as if the exporter is not traceable. So the manufacturer needs to register and the processor or packer, but the foreign exporter doesn't necessarily need to register. But depending on that product and where it originated, if there's an ability to trace back that supply chain, going back to the origin and the manufacturer, then it's dealing with that party to address any compliance issues. But I'll reach out to Nitin also to talk to him about any clarity on that question.
Next, we have, are all import refusals based on lab test or organoleptic test reports?
Not necessarily. It can be based on an exam. So it can be a physical sample, which can be a test, a lab test, or organoleptic testing, which is really reserved for seafood products. Anything that requires the smell test, decomp, is usually part of that. Otherwise, a refusal can be based on, not providing a sufficient response to a detention. So if you have 14 days to respond and you respond on day 20, for whatever reason, then FDA would automatically issue a refusal without doing a sample. So not necessarily based on a test.
I'm just going to ask a few questions now from the ones we received in the chat box. There's a question asking, what about rejections due to noxious weed seeds or Cupra beetles?
Yeah. Yes, that is an issue that both USDA and FDA regulate. I had a company many years ago that was importing soybeans, and there was an allegation of noxious weeds there. You will get a USDA, it's called an EAN, an emergency action notice, if there is found to be noxious weeds in the product, and we can address that. But a lot of it has to deal with, what are the proper ways to prevent noxious weeds and or copper beetle from entering a commodity. And so it might have to deal with fumigation and the correct, procedures for eradicating those pests from the product. And so USDA would regulate that as well. But we've dealt with those issues. And so again, if there's specific questions on, how is your product packaged? How is it coming in? Is it something happening while the product is in transit? I can address that and have a call with you after.
There's a question asking how to let them know after applying for petition, how many times it generally takes to get the petition for green list of US FDA?
Yeah, thanks, Harshila. So again, depending on the strength of the documentation, it should only take one shot. I won't submit something unless I think there is a very strong, if not, 95%, that the company would be removed. I would continue working with the company to make sure the documentation was strong, because you don't want to keep submitting and resubmitting and resubmitting. You want to do it one time. So we would get the company in a place where all of the documents are, strong and persuasive, and lead to the conclusion that the company has overcome the appearance of violation and can be removed.
Next we have, where can we get the list of pesticides which will be tested by FDA for rice, and type of labels which are used for food?
I'm not sure what the question is referring to, the type of pesticides tested. EPA has a list of pesticides that are either authorized and have tolerances, and that I can give you that citation if you need it. It's 40 CFR Part 180, and that will give you a list of all of the molecules or pesticides that are allowed in food commodities. So you can look at the different type of products you're importing. In terms of food labeling, FDA does have a guide on how to, and information publicly on how to develop a compliant food label. There's not necessarily a list, but part of the regulation on food labeling and the guide will give you, the core components of the label. And that citation is 21 CFR Part 101. That will tell you the core components of a food label.
Okay, I'm just gonna go for the last one. I think we're quite over time. So reconditioning is also done by FDA broker, they're asking.
I don't recommend using a customs broker for reconditioning. In my experience, the broker is the best at importing a good and securing the bond for an entry. But in my opinion, they should not be involved in any FDA or customs compliance work, because they could negatively affect the outcome. The reconditioning proposal would either be drafted by us, and we do this all the time, or if you have a quality person in the company, I'd recommend that they, draft and file the reconditioning proposal. But in the proposal, you need to submit the form, and you need to submit copies of the the updated labeling and just the corrective action. So we have a way of doing it that's very organized and clean and clear, and so that FDA has no questions, but to accept the proposal.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Shelley. I think we will be sharing the presentation with everyone, so I hope that would answer some of the other questions that are being posted here. Yeah, we'll also be sharing the list of participants with Ms. Shelley as well, and vice versa. And I hope you can reach out and ask the questions that you have and get it clarified. And finally, we have the counselor from the commercial wing in Embassy of India, Washington, D.C., giving the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Harshala. On behalf of the embassy, I just want to express my gratitude to Ms. Shelley Garg and to all the exporters from the different councils who have joined here. As is evident from the number of participants, I think that at some point we were crossing 300, and the number of questions that have come on the chat box. You can appreciate the importance of this subject to our exporters. So this has proved to be an extremely useful session, Ms. Garg. Thank you so much for the insights that you have provided. It was extremely comprehensive to understand the legal nuances involved in FDA rejections and to clarify different elements like what is a import alert, what are the different lists, what are the steps that exporters can take in order to avoid this in the future. So I think all of this will be extremely useful to our exporters. As you're aware, we have a very clear target of, in terms of export to the US. US is the major market for Indian exports in food and agriculture products and marine products and spices. So as we continue to grow that market, I want to assure all the exporters here who have gathered that we at the embassy are always here to support you. Please do reach out to us. Ms. Shelley has outlined some of the issues on the FDA rejections, but if there are any systematic aspects which you feel that you have tried to resolve, and they're not one-off rejections, but you have attempted to resolve it and it has not been resolved at your end, you can always reach out to us, and we can always take it up with the US authorities as well. So we are here to support you in that. I want to thank also all the export promotion councils here, the APIDA, MPIDA, as well as Spices Board, the directors who have joined here and their leadership for supporting the embassy. I think this is a very, very useful interaction to take forward in other areas as well, not just in terms of rejections, import rejections, but also other regulatory elements as well as export promotion activities as well. So once again, on behalf of the embassy, I want to thank everybody present here today. I know that it is very late in India. It's past 10 p.m., past your bedtime. So once again, thank you. We will be sharing all the contact details with you, and some of these questions that have been asked, we will convey them to Ms. Garg so that she can answer them directly in due course. Thank you once again.
Thank you, ma'am.